trading of these options, we realized it was extremely hard, not just from a Web3 perspective, but a general financial perspective, very hard for users to understand the product when they're given all these different decisions that they need to make. And so that's where kind of abstracting the complexity of the product of Web3 and of the financial product is, pretty important and is what creates that accessibility. And then those more sophisticated, giving the tools to the more sophisticated users to have the flexibility to create their own structures is also very important. But I think that's where we've seen a lot of time spent is just abstracting the complexities away from the financial product itself as well.
Right.
There's always going to be barriers to entry on Web3 with on and off ramps. And, from a user starting from scratch, that's definitely hard, but there's a lot of other teams and groups working on that education.
Absolutely. So, now given your focus on protocol development, let's take a more macro view. And could you share some perhaps insights into the Solana ecosystem, like building of the Solana ecosystem? Do you see any unique advantages or unique challenges perhaps while working on this and working on the ecosystem as a whole?
Are you asking relative to other ecosystems or
Yeah.
just in general?
Relative to other ecosystems, because you mentioned that, you've tried your hand with other ecosystems as well.
Yeah. I think if you asked me this 2 months ago, I probably would give you a different response. 2 months ago, so Solana was everyone was always asking, why are you building on Solana? Like if we were recording this podcast 2 months ago, I guarantee you would have been like, are you still building on Solana?
Yeah,
Why?
probably. Yeah.
But now that we're recording, January 4th, after, a crazy 5 times or 6 times like price change, and there's just very clearly more people coming into this ecosystem when you compare the, actually, I just read yesterday that Solana surpassed Ethereum for number of Google searches and Google search trend. So right. I think like now the answer now is more of just the disadvantage would be competition. As we go into this bull market again, there's going to be lots of people that are forking different open source protocols and trying to compete. And but I think those larger groups that have been building for a few years and have good ecosystem partnerships are, it's going to be a lot harder to overtake this time around. But so I think, yeah, I think there's not a lot of cons right now with Solana. I think there's some big partnerships and some institutions coming in. That's why I think Solana, if you're looking for a place to build, Solana's still my go-to answer.
Right. So in terms of again, what is okay, let's move to the community aspect of things, because you're building on both the sides. You're building for an ecosystem, you're also building a platform, you're building for B2B as well as B2C. So a lot of builders that get started off in Web3, they're not able to understand the craze behind the community aspect, which is so big in Web3, and they find it difficult to get started with the community and perhaps make it engaging and make it the one that is involved with the product itself. What would be your advice to these founders, and how do you make a good community?
Yeah, honestly, I gotta be transparent and say community is my weakest, my weakest skill set. I am a technical founder and have tried to learn a lot more about community management and growing a community and getting an engaged community. And I would say we're still trying to figure it out from our organization standpoint. I think a lot of people want, good roadmap and want to like if people want to get involved, they need clarity on what they're getting involved in.
Right. Yeah.
So you need a good roadmap. You need, good documentation. And then you need just clear instructions on how people can get involved and how they should get involved. But again, like that's a lot easier said than done. but it's really just about clarity and transparency, what you're looking for in the community. You're going to get a lot of people in the community that promise to help out and want to help out, and then when push comes to shove, they don't do anything or they leave. So,
Yeah.
especially in the bull market, you'll get a
Yeah.
lot of noise in the community.
Absolutely. I think, in the bear run or where we are right now in the market, there will be folks who join, but, the challenge is how do you engage and make the community a highly engaged one? That becomes a bit of a challenge as well, because a lot of the perception that the users come with, as well as founders, financial incentive is very big, right? In growing a community, which is not perhaps the most sustainable way to have like a engaged community.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a tough balance.
Yeah, it has to be. It's a thin rope that you need to perhaps balance on. And I think creating a community and having an engaged community, even though it's very, very important, but it can be troublesome getting to a point where the community is actually actively contributing in a positive manner to your project.
Yeah, and it can be distracting if you're spending
Yeah.
a lot of time on community and they're not really helping the platform or helping grow the community or whatever the goals are. Then it's actually just becomes a waste of time. And I remember in the bull market of 2021, when we were first getting started, I made the assumption that, this needed to be very decentralized and community is going to be, contributing in meaningful ways, whether that's to code, to marketing, to whatever.
Yeah, in an ideal world, it would be, but that's just not how it plays out in the real world.
It's just not the case. And it just took so much time away from product and engineering and other aspects of the organization that need to come first before community. And so that's where taking the time to put together the roadmap from a product perspective and the documentation from a community perspective of where they can contribute and how, and really thinking through what is the purpose of this organization, what is the purpose of this community is extremely important, because it's going to be different. Like the community for a meme token is very different for a community of a complex DeFi or financial product.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is very, very true. Two words have not been spoken. Depending on the kind of project you have, your community will look very, very different. And I'm so glad that you were honest here. That at times the community can be distracting, and that itself, it cannot be the highest priority. The product has to be the highest priority. You get something that works, and then automatically, I think a lot of things get sorted.
I totally agree.
So how do you, because you've mentioned that, okay, community building perhaps is not your strongest suit, and you have other folks in the team who would perhaps be doing that. But are there any active, initiatives that you guys have taken to engage with the community or to get community feedback?
Right now we're doing a lot more like ecosystem partnerships with like the B2B side and
Right.
and a lot more like one-on-one like outreach for traders and whales and things like that. I think we see a lot of, if you get good flow from institutions, from whales, from teams, and good support from those groups, the initial community tends to follow. And so I think we're spending more time doing starting to ramp up like Twitter Spaces again, and we've through the bear and now this potential pull, we're spending more time doing one-on-one BD and outreach, working with family offices or things, groups like that, because if you build a product for them, you can make it easy to understand. You can slowly start getting retail participation as well once they see institutions and family offices putting 7-8 figures into a product, then there's trust built in there and whatnot. So we've been spending a lot more time on those one-on-ones, and that's our take right now.
And that is a good way to do about it. I think, as you said, then the community follows when it sees all these positive signals. So are there any collaborations or partnerships that you've talked about, B2B partners, that you are particularly excited about?
Yeah, actually a few. Where Bonk announced this like a month ago that Armada is going to be powering their tokenomics and governance. And so we've been doing some alpha testing with them that should be launched sometime in the next month or so, if not sooner. We are working with another group that is a big Solana player that doesn't have a token, wants to launch a token. Unfortunately, signed some NDAs and probably can't really name drop them at the moment. But there's a bunch of groups. I mean, there's a few groups that we're working with on the tokenomics and governance side that are existing blue chips that are doing a lot more tokenomics and governance stuff. There's Hero Network,
Okay.
Pepper Dex, Flowmatic, Metaplex is discussing revamping some of their governance infrastructure. So there's a lot of exciting partnerships coming out in Q1.
Wow, brilliant. That is again a very positive signal, and I think, like you mentioned, the community follows when there are positive signals around the product and the platform. It just creates a layer of credibility, an additional layer, and that always helps.
Yes, exactly.
So, because you've been working in DeFi for some time, what do you think is going to be the next big thing, according to you, in the DeFi space?
That is a great question. I think we're going to see a lot more. I mean, for the Solana ecosystem specifically, we're going to see a lot more token launches.
Okay.
But that's not going to be like the big product. I think the big thing that we're seeing is more transparency of tokenomics and governance.
Hmm.
A lot of early governance infrastructure, right? You have these tokens and participate in this community, but what does the token actually get you? How decentralized is this community? Um, and things like that, right? So what are you actually control? What is the community actually controlling versus like a core team or contributing members? So I think, and this is obviously why we've spent so much time on Armada, but I think we made the bet 11 months ago that a lot of people are going to want transparent governance and transparent tokenomics and have these things be all on chain and autonomous where there's not central parties that are actually controlling and dictating what happens in an organization or community.
Right. So in terms of the market at large on a macro level, what are the niches apart from DeFi, do you think that would do really well in the next upcoming bull market?
That is a great question. I think like I like playing video games, so I'm a
Mm.
gamer, but
Right.
in the last bull market, I would have said gaming and whatnot, and blockchain backed gaming. But I think we're realizing that the games need to be fun first and foremost, and there's just to build a quality game, it's a lot longer of a development cycle, and so I think that's been kind of a letdown and kind of called that one wrong. But so I'm not going to say gaming this time around. Um, I really think like cross-border payments
Mm.
and more infrastructure that underpins not just decentralized finance or like but just kind of traditional finance um and just the global economy. I think that's still going to be a big piece. I mean, we see that in a high interest rate environment, a low interest rate environment, that stuff is always extremely useful and vital. I mean, look at Visa talking to Solana, and I'm not sure where the latest update on that is, but if they're going to be using some of Solana's infrastructure, that's a big
A
nod
big-
to
Yeah.
payments and transfers.
So cross-border payments and infrastructure, these are the niches you feel would do splendidly well in the next bull run.
Yes.
Okay, so now coming to a few fun questions before we wrap this up. Actually, the one that I had about getting a sneak peek into your development space is something that I would still ask you, perhaps, even though you answered it in parts. What is like a unique feature of the way your team or you approach features and a development? Like, how do you decide which feature should go first?
That's a great question. We focus a lot more on like customer or consumer or user requested features.
Okay.
So I'll have, let's just give an example. Like I have an idea of, hey, I really want this. I think I want this feature. I think people would want this feature. I would use this feature occasionally, but I think users would. But then some of the team will be like, okay, that's just you. Let's put it on the board, open up a ticket for it. But then let's either go and ask people about it if we really feel that strongly, or wait until someone else asks about it. And so we've had a few times where we have these hypotheses about a feature, and then eventually a month and a half later, a week, whatever, someone asks for it. And then we're like, okay, as long as one, especially in the B2B side, if one person's asking for it and they're an early adopter, then like
Yeah.
you're going to jump the priority on that
Yeah.
ticket.
That becomes like
So
greatest green signal, right? That you
exactly.
should be working on that.
Yeah. But so that's since we've been, we've been in the space a while and we have connections and dialogues with customers or users. Um, that's how we do it. And I think that's why it's extremely important to focus on the one-on-one conversations. If
Hmm.
you have a broad community in a Discord or a Telegram, and it's pretty hard to filter out the noise and get product
Yeah,
feedback. A
that's
lot
true.
of those people might not be just like providing product feedback. Some are. It really depends on the type of community and the member and whatnot. But that's why those one-on-one conversations are extremely important, and you can't really replace those.
Absolutely, I totally agree. So now to another, hypothetical question. If you had to put in three concepts or three ideas in a time capsule to do with Web3 for the future generations to find or perhaps to be open in the next decade, which will be the three ideas or concepts that you'll put in that time capsule that you feel will stand the test of time?
Oh man. I mean, one that's not even like it's more of a concept
Hmm.
is just about how crypto and just DeFi as well as governance, they are all these extremely public and fast-paced experiments of bigger systems that we have in our everyday life. And so being able to condense the understanding and knowledge of, how governance works and relating that to governance in a local, a local domicile or even in a large, a country or something like that, and relating governance to how that works, and talking about currencies and what happens when an organization issues a currency, and relating that to the Fed and the central bank, and the United States dollar at being the global reserve currency, and how that affects the economy, and how crypto is just such a public and fast-paced arena for learning and understanding these things. And things that have learned, took a long time, hundreds of years to learn and develop in the traditional space. I think just you learn them very quickly when you just dive into crypto and whatnot. And so I don't know how to put that into a capsule, but condensing that knowledge, I mean, it's been pretty valuable and would stand the test of time, because there's a lot of things that crypto has done, Web3 has done, that where mistakes were made, and those mistakes were made in traditional finance,
Hmm.
a while ago. But in crypto, it's a much more public arena, so a lot more people are seeing and learning that, and then thinking about the next iteration and how to improve on those. So I don't know. That's what I love about crypto, really, is just the fast-paced nature, how open it is, and how everyone can learn, and think critically to improve systems and infrastructure.
Yeah, we're still so early, right? There is so much to be done. And the beauty of the space is that you have to continuously evolve and grow and adapt, because there are so many new ideas and everybody all over the world is kind of involved in this industry. And that is what makes it, I think, the most perhaps exciting industry to be in at the moment.
Yeah, I totally agree.
So now, we kind of have to wrap up, and but I won't let you go without asking you this particular question. This is something I ask everybody who comes on the show. You've been an electrical engineer, and you were in the Web 2 space. You moved to the Web 3 space after seeing the allure of the technology. If you come across somebody and you had to give advice to someone who's perhaps dealing with the same dilemma, what would be your advice to them to start living on blockchain?
Just jump in. You don't have to,
Yeah.
make a drastic change.
Yeah.
I started just part-time tinkering, and when I say
Mhm.
jump in, I don't mean quit your job and jump in. I mean, just start reading up on it, start developing on it, just come up with a project and hack around. I worked a full-time job while building the original Psi options and entering hackathons and all that kind of stuff. And and so it was just part-time for fun. And then you never know where it's going to take you. So, the advice is just dive in and get started and hack around.
Absolutely. I think that's good advice. I feel like this is something that I keep telling people as well, that if you're curious, go ahead and do a little bit of reading up, learn a little about it, but don't just get caught in the learning and, the reading. You'll have to actively get your hands dirty and tinker with the technology a little bit for you to really make anything of it, because the space is very dynamic. There's innumerable stuff that you can read and imbibe and concepts that you can learn, and every day there is a new thing.
Yeah, exactly. So, and learn by doing, right?
Yeah,
Like, don't get caught in just learning, but like
exactly.
learn a little bit, but do a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. That's just good advice. Great advice. Okay, so thank you so much, Tommy, for taking out the time to speak to me. Before we wrap this up, any parting thoughts, anything that you would like our listeners to know?
Check out the Solana ecosystem. Check out armadafi.so. We have a lot of interesting stuff coming out on the on-chain piece for different members of different communities and whatnot. So a lot of exciting stuff.
Absolutely. I think our listeners will be very keen and very interested in checking out PsyFi, Armada, as well as the Solana ecosystem as a whole. All the best, Tommy. Thank you so much for making the time to speak to me today.
Thanks so much for having me.